Hey everyone, welcome back to the Invest in Yourself podcast. Today's guest is Jody Plauche. Many people have seen the video of Jody's father, Gary Plauche, killing a child molester on live TV inside an airport. The reason Jody's father did this was because he found out that his son Jody had been getting raped by his karate instructor. Jody went on to write a book about his experiences and what he went through. The name of his book is Why Gary Why. Reasons Jody wrote this book is to get his side of the story out there, also to help other people that have fallen victim to rape, and to help parents prevent their children from getting raped. Please subscribe to my channel for more interviews like this, and without further ado, let's get into Jody's story. Hey Jody, how you doing, man?
I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm doing great, man. Thank you so much for coming on my show. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, well, like I said, I was telling you before we got on the air, I was telling you I really enjoyed your book, and it really goes into the depth of everything that you went through. And I think the best way to structure this interview could be going into your early life and how all this stuff happened to you.
That sounds good.
So what was it like for you growing up and before with your encounter with Jeff?
Before I met my karate instructor, Jeff Doucette, I was just a regular old athletic kid. I mean, I played all different sports. I went from softball, then you had soccer. I started at 6 years old playing tackle football. And so then at 8, I started playing tackle football at 6. Then at 8 years old, I started playing basketball. So it was just nonstop school, practice, game, school, practice, game. And in 5th grade, my little brother, he wasn't into any sports, and so my mother thought that it would be something good for him to get in because we got in this flyer to take karate, and I threw mine away because I didn't have time for it. I just threw mine away. But when she enrolled my little brother in karate, she also enrolled me and my older brother in karate, and then her best friend enrolled her son Mark, and so there was the 4 of us that started taking karate from this guy named Rick. Okay, so Rick showed up for like one session, and then Rick never showed up again. So we thought, this guy was the jerk because he took off with all the money. But, and again, it probably wasn't even that much money. It was probably 10 sessions for like $35. It wasn't even like that much money. Mm-hmm. And so I want to say like a month or two later, we got a phone call from this up and coming karate instructor named Jeff Doucette. Well, he said he would honor the remaining lessons because, we only had one lesson. We paid for 10. And so we started taking from Jeff, and the deal was if we liked it, then we could start, sign up and enroll in his class full time. So we went ahead. He honored those 10 commitments, but the thing was, before those even 10 commitments were up, he started bragging to my mother about how good we were, how athletic we were, and how we had the potential to be good at karate. And he had this fighting team, and they're going to fight in this tournament in New Orleans this weekend. We all go to the movies before the night before, and we hang out. And so my mother called her brother and said, "Hey, can you check on this guy?" And I don't know if he did. He claimed he did and said that, he's fine, just a few parking tickets. I suspect he didn't. But we ended up going to this movie. They called me Bruce. Then after we went to Chuck E. Cheese, my cousin was having a birthday party. And so Jeff just seemed like this great guy who was really good for kids. He took him up to do things, and he let us. He'd give us money, and we could go run around a mall and go to the arcades and play video games. And I mean, he just seemed like a wonderful person to be around. But that was just the beginning of him grooming not just me but my family.
Yeah, and like you said, you had your mom had your uncle check him out, and Jeff prior he did have some altercations with the law with sexual abuse on people and stuff. It came out later though that all this was discovered again, but at that time, would your uncle have really been able to find it, you think, or it would pop up?
Well, I don't think he would have found any sexual abuse because I know Jeff was arrested when he was like 17 for molesting this little boy, but he was a juvenile, so that may not have been on his record. But I think Jeff did get arrested for like Grand Theft Auto, so that should have at least shown up. But my uncle was like, "Oh no, there's nothing," which again would have been had he actually done the background check.
Yeah, and so you said he kind of groomed your family, and he was just really showing that he was just this really fun, cool guy, and no, and I mean, just so the kids would get along with all you and all the other kids just got along with him just well. And what else would he do to groom? I mean, because I mean, all your other family, you had a few other friends in the group of karate kids and stuff. So I'm sure the family felt more comfortable at that as well because they're like, oh well, they trust him, so we can trust him, kind of deal. I mean, it felt more secure. Would you say?
Um, One of the things that he did was he would isolate the family. So he would tell my mom and dad that, oh, this kid's parents are a bunch of swingers. So if they invite you over, they're probably going to want to, swap couples. Then he would tell that family that, my dad was an alcoholic and they didn't want to hang out with Gary because he was a drunk. And so he kept everyone separated so they wouldn't compare notes. That was one of the ways that, he groomed. And another thing he did was early on, he told my parents the reason why he loved kids so much is because he couldn't have any of his own because he got in his childhood accident where he was climbing over a fence and he got his, you know, junk kind of ripped open and so it sterilized him. And so I guess that kind of took my parents just their minds off of any sexual activity he would be interested in. But back in, I mean, this is 1983, maybe late 82, early 83. I mean, this wasn't something that was talked about, and this wasn't something that was out in the open. So um, I don't think my parents had a clue that people were like that. I mean, I know they knew that some.
Right.
It's almost a classic like when you see someone go, well, we didn't think like anything like this would happen in our community. That's exactly how my parents were in 1983.
Yeah, and you don't really think about that, especially in that time. It was a whole different era. It was just a whole different time. So, but you don't really think about stuff happening. Like, there's horrible things that happen to people all the time, every day. But yeah, you're right. You don't think about it. It's like, damn, this not until it happens to you. So, when your family, I guess before we get into that, we can talk about after he got secure with you and your family, isolated them, of course. When is that when he started to pursue doing
Well,
sexual
that's
actions?
yeah. Well, part of the grooming was kind of naturalizing, testing my boundaries. So he would tell us in order to be a good karate fighter, you'd have to be able to kick, and you have to kick your leg over your head. You got to be able to hit the opponent. And so by doing that, he would say, okay, we had to do splits. And so he would make us like put our hands on the weight bench, and he'd put our feet on cardboard, and he'd make us do a split. But then he would be like, "Oh, look, see how feel how tight it is right here, and it's yeah, that's what you need to stretch out." And so that started him touching near my private areas. So whenever he started touching it, it was kind of like, was that an accident? So that was kind of like him. Well, it wasn't like kind of him. Like that was him testing my boundaries. And as I've said in many other interviews, I mean, I must have passed the test because there was a moment when we were supposed to go crawfishing. So he got a hotel room. All the kids crashed in the hotel room. Well, he isolated me on the end of the bed, and he sat there all night, and he sat there, rubbing my private parts, and I pretended like I was sleeping. So if I was sleeping, I would have no knowledge he did this. So the next day we had the crawfish bowl, and Jeff was like, "Come on, I got to go to the store. Jody, come ride with me." And on that trip to the store, he was like, "Do you tell your parents what I do?" And I knew what he was talking about, but I pretended like I was sleeping, so I wouldn't have known what he was talking about. So I
Mhm.
said, do what? And I think that's the moment when he realized, okay, he's to the point to where I can, you know, advance my sexual behavior because this kid's not going to stay. So that's the moment I feel like I passed his test.
How old were you at that time?
10.
Yeah. So when he was doing this, I mean, what was going through your head? Like, you just didn't want to tell your parents, or how come you didn't want to tell anyone?
Well, I think we've all seen how my father acted when he found out, and I
That's
was
true.
pretty confident. I'm pretty confident that he would have acted like that, whether it came from me or whether it came from the hospital report, which eventually is what happened.
Yeah. So you mean you just kind of felt trapped either way? Your father was going to do something crazy, or your whole, or right, and that's what came out of it, and
Well,
we'll get into that, right?
all right. So I just got through watching the Menendez Menudo documentary on Peacock,
Hmm.
and there was one part in it where Eric was talking about that he felt like he was protecting his mother by not telling her, by just accepting what the dad was doing and not telling the mother because he didn't want to hurt the mother, right? Well, 5 days before they killed him, the mother admitted that she had been knowing all along what the dad had been doing. And I think that that's the moment that kind of sparked them over the edge. Whatever they were like, you know what? I don't have anyone on my side. We only have each other, and that's what I think they concocted the plan to stop the abuse. I won't say started the plan to murder their parents. It was to stop the abuse and to stop the person who enabled that abuse for so many years. And so that to me was sad, but that to me also verifies what they actually went through, and I kind of felt the same way.
Yeah, no, I
Except my
mean,
parents didn't know.
right. I mean, and the thing is too, you're just 10 years old and you don't never experienced anything like that. So, right. I mean, your brain and everything's not fully developed and to be aware of all this shit, you know. So I could see why you would not.
So when I graduated college, I eventually moved to Pennsylvania. I worked in Norristown from 1998 to 2005 at a place called Victim Services. I was for the first 2 years I was an education specialist, so I was the person that would go out and do the programs in the elementary schools and the middle schools and high schools. And then I became the supervisor of the education, so I supervised those that went out and did the program. I would train them, and I mean, we would do the elementary school program called Keep in Touch is Safe and Healthy. So we would teach the children the safety rules, no, go, and tell. So if anyone ever tries to touch you inappropriate, you say no. You get away from that person as soon as possible. So you go and then you tell a trusted adult. Well, I've kind of come full circle and changed my thinking about this. Why are we putting the emphasis on children being abused on the child to make it stop? How about this? As a parent, don't let your kids go around other adults. And if they are, be supervised, be with them. You know, quit being so trusting. I'm not saying be paranoid. I mean, because I've spent the night with my cousins, had a great time. Spent the night with my grandparents, had a great time. I had every other coach that I ever had in all the sports playing never molested me. So don't get paranoid, but be cautious and put
Right.
that on yourself, the parent, the adult. Not, hey, if anyone ever touches you, come tell mommy or you come tell daddy. You know, you as a parent need to know the signals to look for. And I think in my book, I think it makes it very clear on how to respond, how to act, what to say in front of your kids, what not to say in front of your kids, and the signs to look for. And I think that's probably the most important thing from my book.
No, and that's what I seen when you were talking about that. I mean, I have a kid, so a very young one, so I understand like what you mean. You got to be aware. You got to watch out because these people, they can be anybody. I mean, you don't know. I mean, it's not just like that weird, crazy guy in the corner. It could be anybody, and you just never know when these things can happen. So you're right. People got to
Right.
be aware. You got to
Yeah.
go ahead.
You name a an occupation, a teacher, a coach, a fireman, a police officer. We have a case here in Louisiana. It's a couple years old, but I mean, this guy was a decorated police officer, and he was molesting kids, and they even had a situation where they let's just say put bodily fluids in a cake batter and made cupcakes and sent them to the school for the kids to eat them. That's how sick he was, and he was a decorated detective here in Louisiana. So I mean, you name a occupation, and I'll Google search and find you someone who's molested a kid.
That's horrible.
FBI agent, clergy, priest, rabbi, you name it. So you have to be cautious, but don't be paranoid.
Right. So back to your story. After those first attacks, or those attempts, you just kept your mouth shut about it, and things kind of still went and pursued, and that it became more. So what happened after that? After he started, it's like, okay, you passed my test.
All right. So once I passed his test, then he advanced his I don't want to say sexual advances. Like, so April of '83, we were in Houston at a karate tournament, and we were in the van. He called me up to the front of the van. He said, "Jody, I just want you to know something." That basically he told me he was going to perform oral sex on me that night. And I'm thinking like, why? And I don't know why. And I'm just paranoid all the rest of the day. And we're in bed that night, and there's an old John Wayne movie on, and all the kids were sleeping. He turned that John Wayne movie off, and he went underneath the covers, and then he performed oral sex on me probably every day for about a month. And then about a month later is when he's like, all right, now I'm going to have sex with you. And so it would go on for pretty much every day. He would perform oral sex with me, and then he would have sex with me, or the proper term, he was raping a child, and that happened probably every day, sometimes 2 times a day for till he took me in February of 1984.
So at the time, was he doing it to any other kids in the karate class or just you?
Um, yes, he was doing it to other kids in the karate class, but I was his preferred um, target, I guess would be the word. I know of one. Like, I know for a fact of one because there was one night he wanted me to perform oral sex on him, and I told him no. And he said, if you don't do it, I'm going to wake this other kid up and do it. And I said, well, wake the other kid up and do it. And so he woke the other kid up, and the kid went up and did it. But that kid was a year older than me, and he was aging out. And so Jeff wasn't as interested in him as much as he was me because I was younger. I was in his age type. And
Mm.
the other kid had been abused probably for a year or two before he started abusing me. So he kind of traded that kid out for me. And whenever me and that other kid would fight, he would be jealous and he'd beat me up. And I never understood why he was so jealous of me, but I didn't know at that time that he knew what Jeff was doing to me because Jeff had done it to him.
Oh,
I suspect there were 2 or 3 other kids in the class that at that time that Jeff had sexually abused because he would stay at like, if my family came over on a Saturday night, we're all playing board games and watching TV. Jeff would just crash on the couch. And there were other kids that he would crash at their house too. So I suspect that there were a few more that were being abused as well.
wow. Oh, and I mean, yeah, it's just to think like you were not the only one. That's insane, and how much of that stuff really goes on out there. And so, with your family, while all this was going on, how many years did it go on, or how long was this whole
It,
deal?
it went on for, well, it went on for about a year because, I mean,
Okay.
he started the grooming, the testing the boundaries. So if you go from like the first time he started to test my boundaries to the last time he had intercourse with me, you're looking at right around a year.
Okay. And throughout this year, does your family doesn't really suspect anything? Everything's kind of normal to them, and or do they see you
I,
acting different?
okay, so at first they didn't suspect anything, but then
Right.
Jeff wanted to like control what I did, so he didn't want me to play my other sports. He made me quit soccer, football, baseball, just to focus on karate. And so my parents didn't understand why I would do that. And I mean, I remember one time my grandfather like that summer sitting me down and talking to me about how much he enjoyed watching me play sports and how I shouldn't quit. And but it wasn't in my control. I remember thinking to myself when I was talking to him, all right, I'm sorry, Gaunt, but I hear what you're saying, but this isn't my decision. And they didn't know that. I guess eventually, when I was kidnapped, they found out what was going on. Eventually, it made sense to them, but they couldn't understand my personality and my behavior changes, which
Right.
is a sign. Which is a sign.
Right. Yeah. I mean, because you go from this kid that does sports, school sports, day in and day out, and then all of a sudden, this over this year of time, everything drops except that one class. So there's
Right. I want to
something,
quit and focus on karate, which is bull.
right? And so your uncle didn't really get along with Jeff too, right? Your uncle Jeff,
Right. All
he
right. So
didn't
there
get
was
along with Jeff.
well, so what happened was we were fighting in a karate tournament in Fort Worth, Texas, the pro-ams, and if all right, so my uncle lived in Dallas, and so this was an opportunity for us to go spend some time with my cousins. So we drove up with Jeff and my mother and dad. They went to the trip too. Well, the night before the karate tournament, my cousin was hanging out with us in Fort Worth, and Jeff used to always like pop us in the top of the head, like get in line, that kind of thing. Well, he did that to my cousin. Well, my cousin didn't like it, so my cousin called my uncle Jeff and told him that Jeff hit me in the head. So my uncle's threatened to go shoot Jeff and fight Jeff and this that and the other. And so there was just a kind of like a big little kind of incident kind of got blown out of proportion. And so that after the tournament, we were going to stay with my uncle for a couple of days, and Jeff took us to drop us off, and we met him off the side of the interstate. Well, I remember meeting on the side of the interstate, but I don't remember the moment. But I guess when we left, Jeff kissed me on the mouth by. And my uncle saw that as a red flag. And my uncle told my dad and my mother, like, what, that's not right. Something's not right with this relationship. Like, I don't kiss my own kids on the mouth. And he shouldn't be kissing Jody on the mouth. And my parents were so groomed that they were like, "Oh, that's Jeff. That you just don't understand." So they blew it off as a misunderstanding when it was a red rocket, not a red flag. It was a red rocket.
Wow. I mean, that's true. I mean, if he's not even related to you or anything like that, it's like, why would he do that? But like you said, your
Even if
parents,
he was related, even if he was related to me, he should be making out with me on the side of the Interstate 20.
right? Exactly. So, I mean, there was no reason at all. I mean, I mean, they could have seen that red flag coming, but this guy seemed
But
like
it was
he
too
knew what he
late by
was
then. They
doing.
were already groomed. Yeah, they were already groomed. They were already in that world, so they couldn't see it.
So, do you think that Jeff, not your uncle, but he was he had to have done this in the past with other people because he was so good at grooming
Oh
your
yeah, yeah.
family.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. I mean, one of the people who actually kind of alerted my dad was a friend of his, and Jeff had molested his son too. So, um, and it wasn't until probably a few years ago, after my book came out, that this kid, and I got like a page and a half where I wrote directly to him saying, "Hey, you know who you are. I'm talking to you. Same thing happened to me by the same man. So you can't say I don't understand what you went through." And he had a lot of issues growing up with, being arrested, drugs, fighting, violence. Um, I don't know how he is today, but I mean, uh, last I know he was out of jail, but I also knew had been in jail for a while. So I mean, he had some issues, but it was my dad's friend, his dad, that had told him about what Jeff had done to his son, and that's when my dad first got suspicious. Which, when I was kidnapped, became confirmed whenever whenever he was arrested. They took me to the hospital and had a rape exam done on me, and that's because I didn't tell. I denied everything until that rape exam came out back. And once that rape exam came back positive with spermatozoa on the rectal slide, that's when I couldn't deny it anymore, and I had to own up to it, and that's exactly what I did.
I think now we could talk about where when the whole California trip came about, or the California kidnapping is what it really was when Jeff had taken you out of the state and he wanted to flee, and then this events of everyone finding out came about.
All right, so what happened is in the summer of '83, Jeff came up with this idea to do a LSU bandana called a tiger rag. And it was based off of the theories of the Pittsburgh Terrible Towel. As a matter of fact, I'm sitting right here. This ain't it, but it's kind of based on like this kind of this concept. So Jeff came up with a thing called a tiger rag, and it was a purple and gold striped bandana.
Hmm.
And my dad actually introduced him to a guy named Don Landers, who owned several convenience stores in the Baton Rouge area. And so Don Landers agreed to purchase like 15,000 bandanas. And so Jeff was to get the bandana for $1. Jeff sold them to Don Landers for $2, and Don Landers was selling them for $3. I mean, that's kind of free enterprise at work. Well, when Don Landers wrote the check for the initial 15,000 bandanas, instead of paying for the bandanas, delivering the bandanas, and getting the second payment for $15,000, and that being your profit, Jeff blew the first $15,000, so he didn't have the money to pay for the bandana. So Don Landers wanted his money back, and that was kind of what Jeff was going to court for. Was to he may have even, I forget, I think it was civil to begin with, and it could have led to criminal charges because Jeff had written some bad checks. So Jeff left town to avoid prosecution. Well, because I was his love interest for the past year, he decided to take me with him. And so that's how I ended up being kidnapped. But the irony in the whole situation is Jeff was screwing over one of my dad's friends who my dad introduced Jeff to help Jeff out.
Jeez. So I mean, it all kind of started becoming full circle. Like, hey, there's this guy's definitely got a past, and he's he's not up to any good. And after he he was ready to run away, he showed up at your house one day, right? And he's like, "We're going to California."
Yeah, he said his brother dropped him off, and he asked my mother to borrow the car. He said, "June, can I use your car? I got to go run up the street." And it's up the street to go check on the other Karate Kid. His parents were building a brand new house, and Jeff's brother owns, to this day, I think, still owns a carpet business. And they were supposed to deliver the carpet that weekend. So Jeff said he was going to go check to see if the carpet was there. Well, he said, "Come on, ride with me, Jody." And then when we got in the car, we started heading the opposite way. And I'm like, "Where are we going?" He said, "Oh, we're going to California." And that's kind of how he had got me in the car, and that's how I knew I was going to California. And we took my mother's car. It was a Sunday. It was February 19th, 1984. It was a Sunday. We left like 10 o'clock in the morning, drove to his mother's house in Port Arthur, Texas, stayed Sunday night. Sunday night, Jeff's mother called my mother and said, they're here. Jeff will be bringing him back in the morning. Monday, we went to Vinton, Texas. That's where Jeff's buried, to go talk with his uncle to see if Jeff could get money so we could get a bus ticket to go to California. Jeff was telling his mother we were going to New York. He was telling her we were going the opposite way. And the mother was actually concerned about me. And Jeff said, look, we're going to take the bus, and the bus stops off in Baton Rouge. June can come pick him up at the bus station, and I can just continue to New York City. So basically, that bought him that day, because Tuesday morning, my mother and the police officers, my uncle who worked for the sheriff, they all went to Port Arthur looking for me. Well, literally an hour before they got there, we left from Orange, Texas, on the bus heading to LA.
So his mother was in contact with your mother?
During that part, yes.
Yeah, that part. So she knew that, not your mom, but Jeff's mom knew, like, he had kidnapped you, and you were gonna return. They were gonna return you, right?
Jeff wasn't saying I was kidnapping. Jeff said, "Look, I just got Jody with me. I'm going to bring him back to his mother." So, in his mother's mind, she didn't know his long-term plans, and I honestly agree that. Now, as far as helping him skip town, she gave Jeff a notarized copy of his older brother Mike's birth certificate. So she knew Jeff was on the lam, but she honestly believed Jeff wasn't going to drop me off back in Baton Rouge. She didn't know he was going to take me to California. I honestly believe that.
So when did your parents find out that you weren't coming back, that he had kidnapped you? Because he said he was, hey, I'm just going up the street. I mean, was it like an hour or so? Or?
But, well, when my mother and the police got to Port Arthur, Texas, and we were gone, that's when they realized they didn't know where I was.
Okay. So after you guys got your bus, you started heading to California, right?
Yep. We took a bus. We went through Austin, Tucson, Phoenix, San Bernardino to Los Angeles.
And then didn't he do some stuff? He shaved and got a haircut or something?
In Tucson, he shaved his beard, and then, I mean, I could look it up, but I mean, I think we got there Thursday. Friday, we went to Canoga Park. Saturday, we went to Anaheim, and I went to Disneyland. And it was after I went to Disneyland, so it was probably that Saturday, that Sunday, where he dyed my blonde hair. I had like Snow White blonde hair. He dyed that black to kind of, change my look. So he shaved his beard, dyed my hair, and he was just going to tell people that I was his son. And now, granted, I was 11 and he was 25, which means he was very young when he had me. But he also looked old. Like, he didn't look like he was 25. When I think of a 25-year-old today, Jeff looked older than that.
Yeah, I mean, he really did from the video. He definitely looked a lot older. But when you guys got settled in, you were at a hotel, and then he actually did let you call your mother at one point.
It was that Sunday. So we had been gone exactly a week. We were at the Samoa Motel, so my hair probably had been dyed blonde already. This would have been, because we went to we stayed in Anaheim at a motel the night before we went to Disneyland. We went and spent all day at Disneyland, and that night we got a room at the Samoa Motel, which would have been the hotel room that he was arrested in. And it was from that hotel room on a Sunday he let me call my mother, and so she knew for the first time in a week that I was okay. And we were saying we were in New York, but he did let me call and let her know I was okay.
And from those phone calls, the police eventually traced the location, right?
Right. What happened was he was running out of money, and I kind of think he allowed himself to be caught because we were so low on funds. He called collect. He let me call collect, which people who are too young to know what that is when you did a long distance phone call. If you called collect, you would call the operator, and they would ask the person on the other end if they would be willing to pay for the phone call, because it costs a lot of money back then for long distance calls. And so she accepted a collect phone call, but she asked the operator for time and charges. And again, what that is after the phone call's over with, the operator comes back on the phone, and says that call was 27 minutes and it's $13. So she told them the time, how long the call was, and the charges, how much it cost. So when the operator, after me and Jeff hung up, the operator went back to my mother. That's when Mike Barnett with the Baton Rouge Sheriff's Department got on the phone and said, "Look, this is a kidnapping. FBI is involved. I need to know exactly where that phone call came from." And so the operator were able to give our location, and Jeff was apprehended shortly after.
Smart. I mean, that's how they eventually got him. They went and they raided the hotel right after. They must have had the California police or whatever, not where your parents were located. You know what I mean? But
Right? No, they got the Anaheim Police Department to go, I guess, execute the search warrant or whatever they had.
so what were you doing when they came in and started raiding the place?
I was sitting on the bed watching One Day at a Time.
You remember that exact show, huh?
I know they interrupted. I was interested. I was paying attention, and they busted in, and I never know how the story ended. I think it was like the second half of a to be continued. I'd watched the first one. I was watching the second one.
When they came in, how many cops were with them, or how many do you think they
Oh,
probably?
okay, so my 11-year-old brain at the time, 50. Um, best guess, best guess as an adult, probably 12.
Uh,
But I was sitting on the bed closest to the door, so the first guns were in my face, and Jeff was standing to my right, up against the wall. And so they had guns on me, they had guns on him. This one guy walks around the bed and goes, "Oh, I'll punch you in the effing mouth." And then they took me out, and so that's the last I saw of Jeff. And I was outside and I was shaking. And they were like, "Are you cold?" And I'm like, "No, I'm not cold." I said, I'm scared." And they're like, "Oh, you don't need to be scared anymore." I said, "Well, I'm not scared anymore." I said, "I'm scared. I'm still scared from when y'all had all them guns on my face." So they took me out. They took Jeff away. I didn't see him leave. They took me first to the police station, and then they questioned me. Name, uh, what was I doing with Jeff? My hair. Why my hair was dyed black? I was like, I wanted to change. I was trying to lie for him, but I don't think I did a good job. I'm pretty sure they knew I was lying. So
yeah.
they interviewed me at the police station for a couple of hours. Then they took me to this. Then they took me to the hospital, and that's when I had my first male nurse and my first female doctor give me the rape physical exam, rape kit exam, which is a complete physical where they look at your body and ask you about every scar and everything, and then of course you get the blood sample, the urine sample, the cotton swabs. They stuck them uh, you know way up there, and that's eventually how he got caught. Because I knew I was at the hospital, and I decided I was not going to tell. I knew the hospital report was going to come back positive. I was like, that's when I'll be honest, and that's exactly what happened. About a week later, I'm returned home March 1st. I think it was March 9th. So 9 days later, Mike Burnett with the Baton Rouge Sheriff, he came to sat down with my mother and dad and told them that the rape report came back positive. That Jeff, without a doubt, 100% had sexually abused me. And I had a feeling. And then when I got to the bus stop that day, coming home from school, my mother was parked at the bus stop. It was a block away from the house, and so I knew something was up. So she told my older brother, "You go play. I got to talk with Jody." So I got in the car. We drove to the house. She sat me down, and that's when she said, "Look, the hospital report came back positive." And I tried to pretend I was stupid and was like, "What does that mean?" She's like, "It means Jeff fooled with you." And that's when I was like, "Yeah, he did." And so I came clean, and it felt great. It's a secret I've been keeping for a year. I didn't have to keep it no more. And the thing that meant the most, that felt the best, was how calm my mother was. Because I remember the whole reason why I didn't tell him was I didn't want to upset him, but she was calm. And I didn't know at the time, she had been told by Mike Burnett that you need to remain calm because if you react so negatively, it can have a worse impact if you react negatively on Jody than the actual abuse itself. So if you freak out, he's going to freak out. So you need to remain calm. And that's what she did. And I think that was a very, very important uh, technique, I guess, or tactic, because it took away that with me. So I was comfortable to share more information. And I think when people ask me, "Did you go through counseling?" I did. They made me go to a psychiatrist, but I only went for like 6 months, and that guy was like, "He's gonna be fine," and I give him credit for that. And my mother, basically was my counselor. So when I tell people, if you go through anything like this, if you go through something tragic, Um, find your support system, whether that be family members, and sometimes family members are the worst support system. You know, sometimes I say get away from your family. I mean, because you might have dads like, suck it up, rub some dirt on it.
Yeah.
Some people they need emotional support, and however you get that, whether it's through your church, whether it's through your best friend, whether it's through your family. Like I said, family could be the worst. Whether it's a free counseling like Victim Services Center offers, or you can find a rape crisis center that will offer you probably 10 sessions at no charge. Find your support system, use it, um, and I think you can work through most problems. I mean, obviously, if you lose a loved one, there's no overcoming that. But I compare overcoming sexual abuse similar to the grieving process. It's not going to happen overnight, and you'll have your days where you're like, man, it's crazy that I went through this. But for the most part, you can accept it into your life and move on and finish your life without that void, without that hole in it that so many sexual abuse victims seem to have.
No, I really think that's a good point because think about it. I mean, if your mom would have freaked out and started questioning you, and you would have been more scared, you would have been thinking like, well, I don't really want to talk about this now. Instead, you were more opened up. But then
Right.
on the other hand, I mean, your father, he didn't. I mean, he was pissed, but he wasn't like he wasn't like he didn't tell you suck it up, by any means, right? But he was mad, of
No,
course. It was
I
wrong.
mentioned in the book. I was like, as calm as my mother was, and as how soothing that was. Meanwhile, Daddy's over there, just shooting away. My mother remained calm. My dad did.
Right. So when your dad found out, I remember in the book, he just kept saying that he's a dead motherfucker, is what he kept saying when he found out. Like, he was really pissed off. And to talk about that day when he found out, because I mean, it was
Well,
definitely a big deal because it led him to, you know,
well,
take him out.
I'm pretty sure every parent who's been in the situation that my parents were in, and this is a man that they trusted. They allowed in their home. They allowed the kids to go off with him and allowed them. I mean, Jeff was part of the family. Daddy, like I said, was trying to help him out whenever he said he went to the guy he stole money for. So to find that betrayal, to find out what Jeff had done, I'm sure that is the default of any parent who loves their child is that's a dead motherfucker. All
Yeah.
right. So when Mike Barnett went out to California to get Jeff, my mother asked him, she said, "What are you going to do about Gary?" And Mike told her, I've been protecting prisoners long before Gary decided to become a hitman. So Mike was confident that he could be able to. And we were talking about this last night. And so my dad was at the a place called the Cotton Club. It was a restaurant that he'd hang out the bar. That's where he would eat his lunches and he would entertain clients. And he used to work at the news station that filmed the shooting. So he had a lot of friends there. He was on the bowling team. I remember as a kid going with him to the Don Carter's and being around all these people that were on the news because I thought it was kind of cool because they're on the news.
Yeah.
And so he was at the Cotton Club, and the guy, program director named Bob Shadell, he said, "Hey, when they bring in your boy back, and Daddy said, "Well, I think he's back already." And Bob was like, "No, he's not." He goes, "I can find out for you." So he went over to the payphone, called up, told my dad he'll be back in at 9 o'clock. So did Bob Shadell think that Daddy was going to go shoot and kill Jeff? No. But did Bob Shadell give some information that he should have given a parent who was, mourning the loss of his son's innocence? Absolutely not. And so Daddy, with that knowledge, went to the airport, saw the camera, set up directly across from the camera, and that was because Daddy knew if he got on the phone across from the camera, Jeff was going to be walking by. Well, if you watch the video, Mike Barnett comes out and he's looking because there had been like 30 people that had gathered behind the camera that were kind of like, "Oh, who's coming? Who's coming? It's going to be a celebrity or something." And Mike went out and he was looking. He was looking at all the people behind the camera, and he turns around and he waves them on. He says, "Yo, come on." And then you see Mike and Bud Connor. Jeff and Bud Connor. They come walk around the corner. You see Mike looking behind the camera, and Mike told me he's like, at that moment, he's thinking to himself, like, these people are behind his camera waiting for like some celebrity, and it's nothing but two drunks and a pedophile. And he said, as soon as that thought went through his head, he heard the gun go off. He turned around, and in his deposition, I wish I could have printed that. I should have. They asked, and his lawyers asked stupid questions in depositions. They said, when did you realize Gary Plauche had shot Jeff? He said, he goes, "Well, when I turned around and I saw Gary holding a gun." And so that's when he says, whoa, Gary, why? And he grabs him, and he actually shields my dad from the other officer, Bud Connor, because Bud didn't know my dad. Mike knew my dad. Mike and my dad had gone to middle school and high school together. Mike was the one that told my parents what had happened. So Mike shielded my dad from Bud, and my dad just gave up. So he puts the gun up in the air. Bud comes over, takes the gun, calls my dad a son of a bitch, and turns around and goes to Jeff. And I mean, if you see the unedited video, which is graphic, it's on my website if you want to look at it. I mean, Jeff's fate was determined, before he hit the ground. I mean, like he was, even if Jesus Christ himself was there to perform CPR on Jeff, Jeff wasn't going to make it.
Right. And with all that happening, your father, he just knew, like, all right, well, now I got to deal with these consequences. And I mean, he didn't really have major consequences for any of it.
Well,
So I mean,
he
it's
thought
not
that
like, oh, go ahead.
he thought the major consequence was he was going to be shot and killed. And his best friend, he was on the phone talking to his best friend. His best friend had called the sheriff's department and said, "Look, my friend's at the airport. He's got a gun. He's about to shoot this guy." And so the guy's like, "Okay, I'll see what I can do." And after the shooting, that police officer called my dad's friend back and said, "Hey, look, we couldn't get in touch with Mike Barnett." And my dad's friend told him, he said, "Look, it's too late. I heard the shot." And so that guy hung up the phone and immediately went to the airport because it's kind of like across the street from Paris prison. And so, yeah, my dad wasn't worried about any of the consequences. As a matter of fact, the first thing my mother told my father when she talked to him when he was in jail was, "You're going to hell." And he said, "Yes."
Damn.
So he was prepared to make that sacrifice.
Holy shit. So after all that happened, I mean, he still had to go to court. He had to go through a whole process. And what was his ultimate sentence that he was given?
All right. So what happened was my dad had another one of his friends, Foxy Sanders. He was a lawyer in town. My parents had split up in that summer, and Foxy was kind of like his divorce attorney. So um, my dad was represented by Foxy Sanders. Well, the the state, they were pretty sure that in Baton Rouge in 1984 they were not going to get a conviction on a man who killed the guy who had sexually abused his son. Not in Baton Rouge, not in '84. That wasn't going to happen, and they knew that. So they knew they had to make some type of deal. So they were offering my dad a deal where he would plead down to a lesser charge with no jail time, and Foxy would not take the deal. And if you kill someone on TV and you're offered a deal where you're not going to get jail time, let me just advise you, take it. I'm not a lawyer. I have stayed a Holiday Inn Express, but take the deal. Well, turns out Foxy had signed a deal with like an agent to do a TV movie and a book deal. And that was contingent on it going to trial so that they could have all the court records in the, you know, available.
Right.
Well, when they found that out, they literally, uh, I'll never forget. I remember the judge. I remember coming home from school one day, and on the answer machine was the judge saying, "Gary, call me. We need to talk. You need to be in my office at 10 o'clock in the morning." And what it was is they let my dad know that Foxy had signed this deal, and so my dad fired Foxy Sanders. They hired Anthony Marabella, and they worked everything out to where my dad pled no contest to manslaughter. The reason he did that was for the civil trial, so he didn't admit the guilt, um, so that they couldn't use that against him in a civil trial. And the Doucettes, Jeff's family, they were fine with that plea deal. Okay, so he was set to get up to 15 years in jail. Well, the judge gave him 7 years, hard time, suspended the sentence, gave him 5 years probation and 300 hours of community service. So he never did any time in the penitentiary. All the jail time he served was he shot him on a Friday night and he couldn't post bail till Monday.
Oh, wow. I mean, that's what I'm saying. So what was going through your head when this happened? I mean, like, when your father didn't get sentenced at all, like, what was your thoughts? Like,
You know what? I remember the principal coming up to me at school and telling me what the decision was as far as my dad getting probation and community service. And he came to me like kind of excited to give me this information. But I got to be honest with you, I never, ever, ever once, ever thought Daddy was going to jail. There was too much community support. There were too many people who, I mean, go to Twitter today. If you go to Twitter today, type in my dad's name, hit latest. Um, I'm sure somebody has mentioned him within the last 6 hours.
Damn. And that's what I'm saying. He got lots and lots of support. And then even now, when I seen that video go viral, probably back when I was in high school, 5, 6 years ago, I remember seeing that and it was still going viral. And that's so long ago. And I mean, like you said, people still talk about it. There's still so much support for your father. And I mean, it just goes to show like that's like what you went through and everything. I mean, it's not right that anyone should ever have to experience that, and it drives a
I,
person to anger.
I don't know if you have like description in like the podcast where people
Yeah,
can
yeah,
watch it, but
absolutely, I do.
I look up and if, I can send it to you if you can't find it, but look up WBRZ TV shooting, airport shooting or whatever. And they actually on YouTube you can see the actual news broadcast from that night. It's March 16th, 1984. The Channel 10 News in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, on Channel 2 WBRZ. You can watch that on YouTube, but they do have like a little. It must have been put part of a special because the program or the news director, John Spain, he was talking about like they had to decide on how much of the shooting they were going to show.
Right,
Right. So if you go to my website, like I said, you can see the unedited version where it's very graphic. I mean, like you can see the blood just pouring out of Jeff's ears. They didn't show that on the news, but they showed the shooting and when he fell, but they didn't show all the gory blood, that kind of thing.
right.
Well, he said it's the only time in his career, well, when they didn't show the video, like normally when you show someone getting killed on TV, people call and complain, like, how could you show that? He said he was getting complaints like, why didn't you show it again? Like,
Hmm.
he said it's the only video where people wanted to see it. And
Wow.
I made this point in another interview I did recently is that the one good thing about every time I see that video or someone posts it and they got memes and T-shirts and stickers and with my dad's name and image and likeness on it. When I see that, the only thing that like really kind of makes me smile is that people view my dad's actions not as revenge or violence, but an act of love. And so that's
Mhm.
kind of if you can say, hey, this murderous act of love, that's what people view it as.
Yeah, I mean that's true. I mean that you were his son, and something horrible like that happened to you. That some horrible person did that. I mean, it's going to drive someone to do that, especially when you love them. And I could see why there's so much support behind it. I mean, because that stuff's not right at all. How do you? I mean, now today, as a grown man, now you help other people that are going through situations. I mean, not everyone's is different, of course, but what do you think? How do you help people deal with what they go through and cope with all this stuff that goes on?
Well, I don't do it as much because COVID kind of, my book came out, then COVID happened.
Yeah.
Um, Recently, in the last probably 6 months, I've been back out speaking again. Last month, I went to Richmond, Virginia, and spoke at the Virginia Sex Offender Treatment Conference, and there was 380 people. I did a 2 hour presentation. It went really well. I got to share a few kind of stories that I've never done before because I normally don't have the time. I had more time, so I had a little bit more things to prepare for. But that's just it. I like to travel. I like to meet people. I like to go out, share my story, raise awareness, and let people know whether you're sex offender treatment, whether you're probation parole, whether you're a certified sexual assault counselor, that your job matters. You're part of the healing process. Um, Again, whether you're supervising the sex offender or whether you're counseling the victim, your job matters, and I want you to know that and keep doing what you do because I'm going to keep doing what I do.
So when you said you did that speaking engagement there, so that was for counselors that help with the
It,
guys that did the deed or whatever you want to call it, did the
yeah,
molesting.
yeah, all kind of people. I mean, they deal with. I mean, and it could be like juvenile offenders,
Mhm.
but they're the good guys, and so it was a great experience, and I would love to. Unfortunately, I would tell the same story if I went back, but I would love just to continue just to travel and speak and raise awareness and let people know that their jobs matter.
No, I think that's a good thing that you do because you turned your horrible experience into something positive that could help a lot of people out that went through that or had family members that went through it or friends or just anything. You're putting that your word out there more that hey, you can speak up and you can deal with this. There's better ways to deal with this or get away from those horrible things that have happened.
I'll share this story real quick. It's not a quick story. Um, because this is one of the stories I told at the conference that just I didn't find out until this year. Okay, so it's May 6th, 2023, and I didn't find this out until February of this year. All right, so and it's in the book. It's written in the book that was published in 1990, no 2019, but I wrote it in 1993. Okay, I wrote this part in 1993. All right, so the first time I went on a talk show, we had gotten invitations after the shooting, right away.
Oh,
And my parents were like, it's Jody's story to tell. Call back when Jody's 18. If he wants to talk, he can talk all he wants. So we got a call from a lady named Penny Price from the Geraldo Rivera daytime talk show. And so they were like, do you want to come on and we'll fly you to New York and we'll put you up in a hotel. We'll give you $50 per diem and you can be on the Geraldo Rivera talk show. Well, I'm thinking, absolutely, let's go. Free trip to New York. Me and my dad, we said, hey, if we go, we want an extra day. So they put us up for 2 days in the hotel. And we stayed at the Empire Hotel uh, across from Lincoln Center. And we went to a Yankees game the day before. That night, we went to see Jackie Mason. We went to the top of the World Trade Center. And then the next day, we went and shot the show. Well, what the talk shows do is they normally will shoot 2 shows in a day. They normally shoot like Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and they do 2 shows each day. So we got to the CBS studios, West 57th Street, and we're sitting in the green room. Well, we're in the green room, and they're showing on TV the current broadcast that they were filming with Geraldo. It was called The Day the Music Died. So he had on his panel. It was about the plane crash that killed Buddy Holly, the Big Bopper, and Richie
oh yeah,
Valens, right?
yeah.
So they had uh, Buddy Holly's wife. They had Peggy Sue, the real woman named Peggy Sue that he wrote the song about. They had Richie Valens' Donna, the one that he sang about, and then they had Little Richard because Little Richard's like the music star.
Hmm.
So I got to meet Little Richard. Like so after the show, they all came backstage into the green room, and I got to shake hands with Little Richard. And Little Richard was out there going, "Geraldo, I gotta do my special. I'm not gonna sing right now, Geraldo. I'm gonna do my special." So he gets backstage. And I'm like, "Hey, Little Richard, nice to meet you." And he's like, "Hey, nice to meet you."
I was like, what
I
the
was
hell?
like, "Wait a second, dude." I felt like I was in on a secret that no one knew about. That Little Richard wasn't as prissy and as prancy as he played off to be. That was just kind of an act. And if you can go on YouTube before he died. He was kind of like in a retirement home, and he's talking normal. But I mean, I promise you, I'm sure he had his issues with his sexuality, but he wasn't as prancy as he seemed to be. And so I was 18, almost 19, and I'm like, man, I got this insider secret about Little Richard. And that show that we filmed that day, that was April of 91. A couple months later, June 4th, 1991, that show aired. Okay, so a couple days after that show aired, I get a phone call from Mike Burnett. Mike Burnett says, Jody, I got to tell you this because it's going to be on the news. It's going to be in the papers tomorrow. We just got through arresting this pastor. He had been molesting these 2 boys, and one of the boys came forward and said after he saw you on the Geraldo show, he had the courage to tell. And
Hmm.
that was the moment in my life that I really realized that I could take something negative that happened to me and turn it into something positive. I've already gotten these 2 boys from being molested. I also got a letter from a woman from Georgia who Hannah wrote me a letter, um, explaining to me how she was sexually abused and how seeing me kind of gave her hope. And that's kind of like the moment that kind of changed my direction in life. Now, here's where it gets weird. All right, this is
Okay.
where the story gets. I don't want to say good, but just kind of. It's like it's just one of those give you chills kind of moments. So the day the music died was February 3rd, 1959. All right, that was the day that plane crash happened that killed those people.
Right.
The day the music died is the day Jeff Doucette was born. Jeff Doucette was born February 3rd, 1959. So
Damn. All
how
connected
crazy
right
is that?
there. You
Yeah,
know,
no, like I told the people at the conference, I said, look, I'm not real spiritual, but if you are, you might see this as some kind of sign, because I mean that's just such too weird of a coincidence to not be something different.
you brought up that video segment, and I wasn't born in the '90s. I was born in 2000, but my dad, he had sent me that video that's on YouTube now of the Donna and Richie Val, the whole segment that you talked about. It's on YouTube, so I watched it just like a few months ago, so I know exactly which one you're talking about. That's funny. If you never sent me that, I would never seen that. But you're right. That's all connected somehow, and I mean, it's just so. What did you get out of that? Like, what did you think when you found that out?
I just thought that's too weird. Like, I mean, how crazy? I mean, what are the? I mean, we're talking about 1991. What are the
Yeah,
odds in 1991 that we're there because Daddy shot Jeff? And I'll tell you one more funny story about that. Is and then all of a sudden that moment from that show where I met those people changed the way I wanted to live my life, and
yeah,
that's just weird. It's really
it
weird. Well,
is.
so we're on the show, and we come out. We're the lead of the show, and so they go take a question. Well, my dad had never gotten anyone say anything negative to him. It's always been like, I support you. You're a hero. Well, the first question from the audience was this guy, older man. He looks at my dad. And he goes, "Yeah, how do you trust yourself to go into a public building and just start blasting away?"
Oh my god.
And I'm kind of looking like, "All right, Daddy, answer this one, Daddy." And Daddy looked at him. He looked at him. He goes, "When I looked down the barrel of that gun, I knew exactly who I was hitting." And I was like, "You know what? Good answer, Daddy. I was proud of him." So we go to commercial break, right? And when you do the talk shows, they literally would like, "We'll be right back in 2 minutes." They take a commercial break. The producers come out. They put makeup on you. They tell you, "Okay, remember to say this, say that. Don't forget. You want to go do this. You want to say that." And I look over at Daddy, and he's still looking at that guy. I said, "Daddy, stop that shit." And he's like, "Oh, okay, all right." He was still looking at that guy like he. That dude probably. I know that dude felt a good uncomfortable for 5 minutes because Daddy wouldn't take his eyes off of it.
Oh man, that's funny, but I mean, it's like he wasn't a crazy person. Your father, he was not. It was just something that pissed him off out of love, and boom. I mean,
Well,
that's
I'll say this: if there was anything that would be called temporary insanity, yeah, he was not in his right mind. And my dad, he was the kindest, gentlest person. Like, I mean, I didn't drink in college, but every time I'd run into him at the bar, he'd be like, "You want a beer?" I'm like, "Daddy, I don't drink." I mean, I've made up for it since then, but
yeah. Oh man, no. Well, do you have anything else you want to throw at me, or before we wrap
mm,
up? I mean, we're kind of at that
uh,
time, but I really appreciate you
the,
giving me some time. But what were we gonna say?
the book's on
Yeah.
Amazon.com. We just completed the audiobook a couple of months ago, so that's if you don't like to read or if you're doing a long trip. It's only 6 hours on the audiobook, so you probably can finish the book in quicker than 6 hours if you read it yourself. Because I mean, it's read you know at a kind of talk narrative than it is. Like I know people just can read a lot quicker than I can. Um, but it's Amazon got the audiobook. If you want an autograph copy or a signed copy, you can email me, and the book's $20. Sometimes it's a little cheaper on Amazon, but $20, $5 shipping and handling because I got to get the envelope to ship it and pay for the postage. But just Venmo me, PayPal me, $25, and send me your address. If you're outside of the United States, it'll be more. It'll be $20 plus whatever the shipping cost is. But if you want a signed copy, I'll send that out. And just why Gary? Why? And remember, just because something bad happens, it doesn't have to score you or ruin you for the rest of your life.
It's true, man. And I'll be sure to put your website link and your Amazon link so people can get easy access. Just click the link and order from there. But again, man, I really appreciate you coming on and taking out an hour to talk and share your story.
No problem. Thank you for having me. Invest in yourself.
Man, What a story. Jody really went through something that no one should ever go through. Jody turned a horrible event into something positive though. Through his book and speaking engagements that he does, he can help people that went through the same thing similar to him. Please comment any key takeaways that you got from this interview. Please share it with anyone that you think will enjoy it. Also, please don't forget to hit subscribe to my YouTube channel if you want to get more shows like this. Also, I'll put Jody's book in the video description as well. I'll also include my clothing brand website if you want to support me. Thank you again so much for watching.